she never ever feels fully safe in your presence, even if you guys are in a relationship. And she self sabotages. Let's say even if you are working towards stability, you might have seen patterns wherein she's just constantly coming up with things wherein there's just a sort of self sabotage to not have that stability and peace, because she's always trained for chaos. You compliment them, the more her heart melts away initially if they're very naive, because she has never received that initial fatherly love or praise from her loved one, from a loved father. And with these type of people who tie their self-esteem a lot to the outside metrics, you see that if there is like a slightest bit of criticism, it just devastates her sense of worth completely, and this gets her into a pattern that Yo guys, namaskaram. So in this video, we'll talk about a very predominant term that is thrown around a lot, which is known as daddy issues. Now, when I was thinking about this video and just researching, basically, I thought you just have to tread the waters very carefully, because you see famous feminists talking a lot of baloney, and they term certain people who are just different in their POV from them. There's no repercussion for those extreme things, whereas as a man, if you talk about certain things, a lot of people would just start venting out for some weird reason. But anyhow, I think the aim of this video would be just to understand from a contextual slash psychological perspective, that why do daughters firstly and then later they end up turning women, why is there like so much toxicity around them, or let's say the inability to just understand people from the right context. So let's see how this video goes. So in India we throw this word a lot, daddy issues, but the subtle connotation behind it is that of an insult. But if you just take some steps in developing your thinking, in making sure that there is some depth in your thinking, you wouldn't be influenced by alpha influencers, because the thing with them is like they have a certain level of experience, and then they use that experience as a benchmark for everything in their life. You see, that is where it becomes toxic. And then even if there is some depth to someone's point of view, or there's some perspective, it just gets washed away, because our mind equates toxicity with this whole notion. So I think from childhood, if we look at it from a woman's perspective, if she does not receive, let's say, an emotional safety of sorts, a validation from her father in general, or trust, she would have these wounds and scars, which would then later manifest in adult relationships, especially with their so-called loved one, which is a man in this case, if their preference is just heterosexual, that is straight. So today we'll just not try to blame women, we'll just try to understand them. So it would just revolve around certain patterns which I have seen, so that there's just no confusion, and men generally don't get manipulated. Or let's say even if a woman is watching this, she could just understand these patterns within herself. So firstly, let's try to understand attachment. We see that women in general over attach too fast. She bonds emotionally in a few days because she craves male attention that she didn't got at home. Someone intensely loves her for a short period of time. That feels like love to her, not danger. Because subtly, you see a lot of toxic male, let's say, if women are naive in their understanding. They'll shower her with all this love and all those things so that they can get S in return. And women just feel manipulated, and then that wound gets repeated in their next relationships. But the core with which it comes from is how she related to her father in her childhood. Like, was there a space of safety or not? So she starts imagining, let's say, if she becomes intense in certain relationships, she starts imagining long term futures with them, because she wants that sense of emotional security which was missing throughout her life. A lot of men misread this as a sort of chemistry happening, and then for some manipulators, it just serves their need. But a lot of simple people, it is just a relationship built on trauma, and there's like a lot of anxiety that if a certain action done by a woman would lead to this consequence, or if a certain action done by a man would lead to this consequence. From a woman perspective, she fears you leaving even before things begin. And I see this pattern a lot in Sims as well, that just the slightest of things and they'll just worry a lot. Now, the second point, I think, if I come at it, is just this fear of abandonment, the fear of not being left alone in life. Small delays in text triggers her childhood wounds. You see that a lot of so-called prevalent wisdom around certain alphaness, around how to get girls, is just focused on these very basal things. You just ignore her for too long and then she'll understand. All of this is coming from because she had scars or not proper healthy relationship bond forming with her father. Now, from a woman point of view, she assumes that if a person does this consciously or delays in text, she assumes that you will leave like her father did emotionally when she needed her the most in childhood. And she needs frequent reassurance to feel safe, interprets your silence as a rejection. That's why a lot of escalations happen from her end. And that is where manipulators thrive, because they know that they are very comfortable with that silence, because at the same time, let's say if there's a texting game going on, it text to one woman and then there are like 9 10 different texts. So whatever time is being invested on those 9 10 people, she just feels left out or abandoned, and that is where that person succeeds. Now, seen women in general overreact a lot to tiny issues because her deeper fears are activated, and then all of this just manifests into this hot and cold behavior where you yourself would be confused. Let's say if you are a sane man going into such patterns and things like that, you'll see that one day she's warm, the next day she's cold and distant. When she gets close, let's say if there's something happening, her fear activates and then she suddenly pulls away. When she distances herself, her fear of loneliness activates and then she comes back. So there's like a lot of to and fro. This is, to be honest, not manipulation. It's just her confusion and emotional childhood wounds being replayed, because she sees the reflection of her father in you. A lot of simps get trapped to fix her inconsistency, and then there comes a pattern of being over dependent on the relationship. A lot of smart and manipulative women also do this, that they use the relationship to fill the emotional voids within. Of course, they themselves don't know about it, but it's just a matter of observing patterns among people and how they function in their day-to-day life. You might have often seen that you become an emotional backbone of sorts, wherein every small thing is going wrong and then you face the brunt of it. And somehow you feel that thing within you to fix all of it. She demands constant attention and closeness from you. This is where things start becoming toxic. Without you, she just collapses emotionally. You might have had certain experiences. This leads to a lot of suffocation in the relationship. A lot of dynamics are just gone out of the window. Now, how all of this leads to a sort of weird clinginess in an emotional way. Let's say during conflicts, you see that if there are like fights happening in relationships, she panics instead of calmly discussing and starts blaming, you did this at this time, you did this to me back at this time. And a sudden activation has also happened, that for a lot of women I've seen that they fear loss, they become excessively apologetic or overly dramatic in their gestures. She can't tolerate any disconnection, and any distance feels like an abandonment of sorts. Men feel drained trying to manage all of this emotional chaos, all of this emotional storm. So, why does this happen? The number one reason is she has difficulty trusting men because she assumes that men will hurt her. A lot of women take time to open up emotionally with people and feel safe. And you might have also seen that she tests a lot of your intentions constantly. That what is it that you want? Is it yes or is it something else? Let's say if a woman is not so naive, then these patterns would start coming up. You would also see that she would just value more on proofs and not the promises that a lot of people do on words. Her childhood trauma makes her misinterpret, let's say, when if you're being neutral, as threats because of a lot of childhood conditioning. This stems further into a lot of jealousy and insecurity. That is where you can say, quote unquote, these alpha males and influencers teach that you might have seen this very predominant, that if a woman chooses one male, that is known as aka alpha male, all other women would also choose that person because of sense of insecurity within them. And a deeper reason is women in general feel attracted to the people whom everyone chooses around them. So this is known as pre-selection, that you're already being selected by the other potential mates in a tribe, and that just eases up the game. But anyhow, coming back to jealousy and insecurity, she compares herself constantly to all these women mates in general. And you might have seen that any female friend that you have, would feel like competition. She reads too much into social media, like what is the type of people you're following, what is the type of comments you're doing on certain females posts and things like that. And then this fear of being replaced is too strong in her, due to which she indulges in such patterns. And then this kind of leads to a zone of insecurity where one just never feels enough in that relationship, because in her childhood she never felt enough because her father constantly neglected her. This happens a lot, and then this leads to a state of constant panic and hypervigilance. She overanalyzes everything that you say, scans for the minutest of signs that you're losing interest, tries to go in a lot of very weird tangents. Small mistakes might feel a lot huge. And if you see that all of these are just childhood patterns wherein she's just reacting to certain triggers from childhood and not the current present actual reality that is happening, this creates a lot of tension even when you're being normal. In psychology, there's one very predominant type of personality which is known as the avoidant anxious personality. What happens? Let's say if a woman wants a sort of closeness, she fears it, due to which she withdraws. And if she wants to commit, she fears commitment and she avoids it. So this nature, wherein there are like two things happening at the same time, confuses a lot of men very deeply. She never ever feels fully safe in your presence, even if you guys are in a relationship, and she self sabotages. Let's say even if you are working towards stability, you might have seen patterns wherein she is just constantly coming up with things wherein there's just a sort of self sabotage to not have that stability and peace, because she's always trained for chaos. And you might have seen that she's always over testing you emotionally. There are these tests that she pushes you away to see if you return, creates fights to just see that how loyal you are. There's a subtle reason for it that let's say if you plan to get married and have kids, she thinks from that perspective that if I'm testing this man, if I'm creating this fight, if he's not even able to sustain the fights that I have with him, how would he able to protect me and our child? Let's say if there are genuine fights happening in the world. So this is where this whole test and fighting thing comes in. Tests are boundaries to feel like see a man of his word. These tests come from biological reasoning, proper, well thought out reasons. Men who fail these tests get labeled as emotionally weak people, and then all of this is stemming from because of her self-worth issues. A lot of women have very low self-esteem, but they mask it with a lot of confidence. Because women in general have trained themselves to show the opposite of what they actually feel. A common example can be a lot of women who are very emotional, let's say in a private setting, they would appear to be the boldest of people socially. A lot of women use achievements as a sort of armor to show to the world that now I also have a place in society. Essentially, it means to show to their father that they can also achieve certain things because of let's say certain comparisons that might have happened in their childhood with her brothers and things like that. And you might have also seen in a lot of women that the more you compliment them, the more her heart melts away initially if they are very naive, because she has never received that initial fatherly love or praise from her loved one, from her loved father. And with these type of people who tie their self-esteem a lot to the outside metrics, you see that if there is like a slightest bit of criticism, it just devastates her sense of worth completely, and this gets her into a pattern that does she even deserve love in this life? She doubts all of that. Due to which, what happens? She chooses a lot of toxic, a-hole, and unavailable men because subconsciously, humans are very consistent in the patterns that they repeat. So she wants to repeat in her life the father's emotional unavailability so she can justify to herself of being this victim of sorts. If you are a healthy man, quote unquote, she would feel that you're very unfamiliar, boring, predictable, and all of that. To her, drama feels like real love because there's a lot of intensity, and because there's so much hollowness within that, this sense of consistent drama just feels like life. She confuses this sort of intense bursts of fights and whatnot with a sort of intimacy, which is very weird because true intimacy is just built on very different foundations. You might have seen that women with a lot of daddy issues pick men who validate her pain narrative in their stories. she's always the victim, she's so bad. Smart manipulators or alpha males understand this on a subconscious level, and they just use all of this to her advantage. And what happens in all of this, we end up creating a society wherein there's like a lot of gender games and not very healthy balance of sorts. And this just keeps on continuing and continuing. You might have also seen that there's one more set of women who want a lot of independence. Basically, what they're doing is they're overcompensating the inner, let's say, restlessness or void with showing that how independent they are. Basically, what these women do, they brag about not needing anyone, but it's quite contrary, the opposite. And it happens in a lot of women that if they're dependent on someone emotionally, they view that as weakness, so that they shut that off and become very woke feminists. They reject help even when it is genuinely necessary. They say that we can just do everything on our own and things like that. Deep down, they want care but don't receive it. And usually, you might have seen that these type of women are also very predominant. You can say animal lovers of sorts, because they find that love reciprocated to them, and they know that let's say animal, quote unquote, would never leave them. A lot of men find these type of women as very intimidating. Another pattern as to how it manifests. So I've done one podcast in this channel. It's with a psychologist. You can just check it out in the updated podcast series, wherein that psychologist, Mr. Rajneesh, was talking about how, let's say, if a woman is wrongly touched in her childhood, either she becomes a lot sexual or she becomes totally closed. The reason being, I feel that let's say a person is hypersexual, they are seeking validation unconsciously from the other person. And if they are very closed sexually, they just fear a lot of genuine intimacy that can happen. Both are just reactions which are coming from a trauma instead of genuinely healing themselves. This whole obsession around sex, whether running away from it or indulging too much on it, becomes a coping mechanism of sorts. Men misinterpret these patterns a lot without understanding the roots and the context from where they're coming from. And that is why I say, if you check my previous videos, that it's very important to understand the context from which a person is coming from. A lot of women waste their life seeking male validation consistently, wants reassurance, compliments, gifts, attentions. You see the script. A lot of people who are very active in dating use that to just feel worthy in their life. You see that women who jump relationships after relationships after relationships, because the idea here is that they get attached to the validation, the high that they're receiving, not the genuine person. Without any genuine attention, she feels emotionally empty within her. And then this just turns into a lot of impulsive relationship jumping again and again. These are just patterns which one should be very aware of. So, how do women with daddy issues play out in your relationships? Firstly, she'll have difficulty accepting your boundaries. Let's say if you have told her that this is the time I want to do for this and this, when you really need space, she just panics a lot. She thinks that boundaries mean rejection, because in her mind, there was never any sort of genuine love that happened in her life. Let's say from an emotional perspective, that her father should have given. You might have also seen a manifestation that if you say you need type, it is just a personal thing for her. And because you're the only thing that's happening in her life, this makes her overreact, because her entire needs emotionally and otherwise are just being filled through this one single person, not exploring a lot of hobbies and things like that. And then there's a subtle projection of her father on you. She attributes her father's behaviors to you, assumes that you lie, cheat, hurt, leave, which she has seen in her childhood. Even let's say when you're stable, she imagines worst case scenarios and ends up discussing a lot of them with you. She fights a lot of battles with you, thinking about her father, because she relates the relationship with you as what her relationship to her father had been in the past. She's not genuinely fighting with you, but just playing a script which happened back in her childhood, and having this habit of creating a lot of unnecessary conflict. You might have also seen that there's this tendency to just parent the other person, parent your partner basically. She expects you to either emotionally take care of her, or she wants to take care of you as a child, seeks a sort of fatherly protection, or thinks of you like a savior of sorts and things like that. This is where things become a lot toxic. You start avoiding a lot of people, and all of this is just coming from that extreme fear of rejection, wherein the person should not leave me. Now, how does this manifest? Any good relationship that might happen, she just sabotages, because when things are about to get serious, He creates a distance. She starts creating a lot of problems when none exist. There's a lot of fear around intimacy and things like that. She feels that she does not deserve any good men and things like that, and which I had mentioned that she confuses stability with boredom. All of this just leads to a sort of trauma bonding, and the cycle repeats, which is she's chasing that high in the form of people wherein she's just wanting to bond over drama, like attracted to a lot of chaos, creating highs and lows in relationships, attracting to a-hole, thinking that it feels like the real deal, the genuine connection. Pain, like this glorification of pain, feels like genuine love. The reason I'm going in a lot of depth is because if you see these patterns, please just understand that is this really the type of person that I would want to invest, let's say, a long term marriage, long term investment. Because I think a lot of women with daddy issues are confused with their identity at the core, if I come at it, because they just don't know what they want. They're constantly changing their directions as per their environment. And they just want to mirror what they think their partner wants instead of just generally taking into consideration the actual personality that the person in front of them has. Basically, now, as a man, since I've gotten into a lot of depth, how we can handle this. First of all, please understand you don't have the responsibility to fix her, be her savior, and whatnot. Just please have genuine, authentic boundaries. Please understand you're not a therapist. You don't hold any responsibility to be the emotional backbone. Be this person who just carries the weight of unnecessary burdens and traumas and whatnot. Please don't rescue, don't enable this chaotic patterns. Just center yourself on stability and calmness, and then just let it lead. Let your calmness lead the relationship. One more thing that comes in tandem with this is letting this consistency of calmness be your superpower. Women with father moons crave a lot of stability. They want predictability. If you're in relationship with such people, and if you like genuinely love, thinking you have hit it off and things like that, don't ever react emotionally to a lot of things. Just have clear communication and base your relationship on the center of honesty. Even if it requires her to see therapy and all of that, just let her do that. Fix herself. A relationship should just be a thing where there's just joy happening. Of course, there are fights, but the ratio should not be of like 90% fight, 10% peace. It should be the other way around, because if you're like genuinely not happy in your relationship, that would just spill over a lot in your day-to-day life. Don't panic at her panic, basically. Just being grounded a lot on your work, on your calmness, and just having proper understanding that instead of villainizing and looking for, let's say, so-called influencers, whatever it is on the net, having genuine professional help. Another thing is just watching patterns of your partner, because patterns and actions never lie. A lot of trauma influenced women say things that they can't follow through on, so their actions never match their words. Observe a lot on the real day to day behaviors. Please understand that even if you're having fights and things like that, the words that are coming are very emotional, but the actions that she's doing on a day to day basis mirror her deepest beliefs. Don't believe in intensity, excuses, whatnot. Just base the relationship on the right centers, and very, very important. If you feel, which I keep on talking, that this is not working out, don't overinvest, just walk away. If her wounds destroy your peace, leave. Like, there's just no point investing a lot. Ideally, how relationship should happen should not be traumas bonding over each other. You're just like so self-aware that you know what is it that you want, and a similar expectation should be expected from the other. But practically, I see that a lot of people just over invest into a lot of people, and they just cannot leave. Unfortunately, these type of people who are married just don't know how to fix things. So I think these points which I mentioned earlier talk on that. And please understand, bearing this pain of the entire world is just really not true genuine love. Basically, we need to bring people into our life who are self-aware, and just don't villainize, I think, women with father wounds, because as men also we have mother wounds and things like that. So in my previous video, I talked about the mother son trap. Do check that out. Everyone is hurt, everyone is Homo sapien. I believe the first step should be kindness and compassion. But after a point, if you see that it's just interfering with your peace, probably it's just time to prioritize your own peace. understanding the true genuine patterns that happen, protecting your energy for your work, for the value that you want to bring to this world, and choose genuine relationships that don't scar you and traumatize you. Break away your trust from this. Just basing things on the right center is very, very important. But anyhow, I think that was a video. Just wanted to share some thoughts. Just some insights which I had. Probably I just would go a lot deeply into certain things, that what are the type of daddy issues that a general female has in our context, and what you can do practically to identify, because I'm assuming that a lot of you would be having sisters and things like that. So it's very important that there's just healthy relationship bonding on all levels and fixing of traumas and scars and things like that. So there are like not any long-term repercussions and consequences, and we just live a life filled with creating positive value in this world. So anyhow, this was a small video. Let me know what you feel about it. I'll catch you in the next video, and until then, this is Debu Ki Dastak from Debu Ki Dastak signing off. Cheers. Bye.